Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to another video on Lightning Web Component Development series on Apex Hours. So guys, in this video, we'll learn about component lifecycle and composition. In this video, I'll show you what is the lifecycle of a Lightning Web component, how, how it start on by creating a DOM element, and what will happen if you will remove that component, what is the lifecycle of it. And also we will learn about compositions, like how you can compose a component, a child component and parent, and a parent component and a grandparent component, and how you can utilize the life cycle events in between those components. Okay, so let's start today's video. Let me start the presentation now. A short introduction about myself. I'm Kapil Batra. I'm a Salesforce MVP, and I'm a founder of blog salesforcebold.com and YouTube channel Salesforce Bold. I'm from Ajmer, Rajasthan, and currently working as a senior Salesforce consultant. So the agenda of this video will be to learn more about Lightning Web Component Lifecycle hooks and composition and how you can use them. So today we'll learn about constructor, connected callback, disconnected callback, render callback, error callback, and Lightning Web Component compositions. So where you can use these lifecycle hooks. Let's start with constructor. The constructor fires when a component instance is created. So whenever a Lightning Web Component instance will be created, it will call the constructor. And then the next is connected callback. So connected callback will fire when a component is inserted into the DOM, or you can say it is like page load of a component. Like in Aura component, we used to have do in it. So the same way you can have connected callback here in Lightning Web Component. Disconnected callback fires when a component is removed from the DOM. You can have tasks like, let's suppose if you are having an event listener and if you are running it on the connected callback, then you can stop that event listener on the disconnected callback. All right. Render callback. Render callback will fire when a component is rendered on the DOM. So if you wish to make any functionality or related to the rendering stuff, then that should be on the render callback. Error callback. Error callback will fire in case of any error during a lifecycle hook or event. All right. So this is a diagram of the lifecycle hook of a Lightning Web Component. When a web page is loaded, the browser creates a DOM object, or we can say document object model of the page. The HTML DOM model is constructed as a tree of objects. The DOM is a programming interface for web documents. It represents the page so that programs can change the document structure, style, and its content. It basically creates a tree of objects. Like first there should be a root element, then there should be, like in HTML we have root element, then head, body, and other elements. Then you may have some text, image, custom CSS, and other stuff as well. So if you will see in this diagram, so this diagram is talking about one parent and one child component. So first, as you can see, constructor is called, then public properties are getting set on parent, then parent component will be inserted on the DOM. Once parent component will be inserted on the DOM, connected callback will be called on parent. Okay. From this connected callback, as parent is already inserted, you can reference different DOM elements. Then parent will be rendered. Once parent is rendered, constructor is called on the child component, and the same cycle will be running for the child component as well. And if you are having a grandchild component, so once the child component is rendered completely, after that the same cycle will be running for the grandchild component as well, right? So now let's dig a little deep in it and see their compatibilities. So let's start with constructor. And with every lifecycle hook, we will be having an example also. So I will show you how you can have code in constructor and other lifecycle hooks as well. So when you should call the constructor and when you should use it. The constructor method fires when a component instance is created. You should not add attributes to the host element during construction. The first statement must be super with no parameter. This call establish the correct prototype chain and value for this. Make sure you always call super before touching this, right? It flows from parent to child. So if you are having a composition like grandparent, parent, and child, then first it it will be called on grandparent, then parent, then child. So you have to adjust your code accordingly, right? Don't inspect the element attributes and children because they don't exist yet. Because like right now we are on the constructor. Don't inspect element public properties because they are set after the component is created. Right now the component is not created. We have just created an instance of this component. Okay. And also you should not assign any property in constructor because they are not ready at this point. The flow of constructor is flow from parent to child. It means if there are child components in LMC, the first parent constructor will be called followed by child constructor. Now let me show you a quick example of how constructor will work. Then we'll move to connected callback and disconnected callback. So for that, let me refresh it and open my VS Code. Okay, this is lifecycle hooks. Okay, so here I have created an empty component for this example, where on the HTML side I'm just having a text which says check console logs, and on the JavaScript I am not having anything. Okay, so here if you will go to the output just says check console log. Okay, now let's try to add something here. Let's start with constructor. So to add the constructor, you can simply call it like this, open and close curly braces. And let's suppose, like for this example, I'm just having a console log here, console.log constructor. Okay, done. Now if you'll notice, there's a warning which says expected to call super. As I mentioned, like you have to call super here. So let me just do it quickly. So as I mentioned earlier, the first statement must be super with no parameter to establish the correct prototype chain values for the parent, child, and for the components. Okay, so this is a basic syntax, we can say basic syntax of constructor. Okay, let me quickly deploy it and show you the output. Okay, it is deployed. Now if we will go back here and refresh it, and if I will do inspect element and see the console log. Okay, so here you can see constructor here. Please ignore these logs. These are from the other examples which is related to composition. So here it is constructor, what we have called right now. Okay. Now the same way we'll be calling other lifecycle hooks as well underneath it. All right. Now let's move to the next one, which is connected callback and disconnected callback. So when you should use connected callback and disconnected callback, these two lifecycle flows flow from parent to child. In these lifecycle flows, you cannot access child element from the callbacks because they don't exist yet. So child element will only exist on render callback. Once the component is rendered, as we have seen in the previous diagram, once the component is rendered, then only it will proceed further for the child elements. Okay. To access the host element, you can use this. To access element in a components template, use this dot template. Let's suppose if you would like to access a element in a component, or let's suppose like if we are having a composition where we are having a parent and child component, if you would like to call a function in a child component. Okay, so what you can do is in your parent component you can use this dot template to access that specific child component tag and call that function. So basically you can access the host element using this and then call its function, its properties. You can use connected callback to interact with the component's environment. For example, you can use it to establish communication with the current document or container and coordinate behavior with the environment. You can also perform any initialization task. As I told you, it can work like a page load, such as fetch data, set up caches, or listen for events. You can also use it to subscribe and unsubscribe from a message channel, or maybe if you'd like to add an event listener, so you can use this connected callback to add it. On the other hand, you can use disconnected callback to clean up work done in the connected callback. So whatever you have done in connected callback, make sure you clean up the memory. You clean up the same in the disconnected callback. Like maybe you can delete cache or removing event listener. So you can do these stuff on connected callback. So in this diagram, as you can see, as I said, like this flow will be parent to child. So first parent removed from DOM, then disconnected callback will be called on parent, then child will be removed from DOM, and then disconnected callback will be called on child component, right? Let's understand it by an example. So if we will use the same lifecycle hook component, and if I will add connected callback here, okay, and let's suppose I have added a console log which says connected callback. Okay, and the same way we can create disconnected callback as well. Console.log, disconnected callback, here it is. Okay, let me push it to my org. All right, now let's see the log again. So here you can see constructor, then connected callback here. We won't be able to see disconnected callback because we are just rendering that component. We are not removing it from DOM. So as I told you, you can do events like you can start something on connected callback and stop the same on disconnected callback, or clear the memory and do stuff like this. So for example, I am creating a list here, my list. Okay, and in connected callback, I will do this dot mylist dot push, and I'm pushing a value here, Salesforce bold. Okay, so as you can see here, I have added a value in this dot mylist dot mylist array. Okay, now in disconnected callback, what I can do is just to clear the memory, I can do like mylist is equal to empty. So that's how you're supposed to use connected callback and disconnected callback. You won't be see any different in output right now because we are not using these values anywhere, and we are not using these values on any UI right now, so you won't be able to see any output here. But yes, I mean, this could be a basic examples like where you can use the connected callback and disconnected callback stuff. Okay, let's move to the next lifecycle hook, which is render callback. So you can use render callback when you have to perform tasks once your component is rendered on the DOM, rendered on the screen. Okay, you can use it to perform logic after a component has finished the rendering phase. This hook flows from child to parent. Okay, please make sure you note this point. This hook will flow from child component to parent component. First, it will be called on child, then parent. If you are having a long hierarchy like parent, child, and grandchild, so it will be called on grandchild first, then child, and then at the end, it will be called on parent. A component is usually rendered many times during the lifespan of an application. To use this hook to perform a one-time operation, you have to use a Boolean parameter in your JavaScript. Like you can, for example, you can use has rendered to track whether render callback has been executed. So to check if the render callback has executed, you can have a parameter in a JavaScript, and on the render callback you can make it true. Okay, and while where you have to call your code, you can check like if this parameter is true, then don't perform this operation. Otherwise, if it is false, then perform the operation and make it true. So for example, if we will move to the same lifecycle component, so here you can use it like this, render callback, and let me add a log here as well. Render callback, all right, and let me deploy it. Okay, it is deployed now. Let me check the output. Here it is. So as you can see, first you are able to see constructor, then connected callback, and the render callback after that, right? So that's how you can use render callback. Whenever you have to perform something, once the component is rendered on the screen, the render callback will be the key for you. All right, let's move to the next one, which is error callback. So error callback implement you can implement it to create an error boundary component that capture error in all the related component in its tree. For that, you can create a common error component, and in error callback, you can display the error in that common component. So if you will have an error in any of the component in your tree, let's suppose if you are having a long chain of components, so if you will have an error in any of those components, so error callback will be having that error callback will be catching that error. Error callback captures lifecycle hooks or during an event handler declared in an HTML template. So the syntax for this error callback is pretty simple. In your parent component, what you can do is you can simply declare it like this, error callback. Here you can pass error and stack of it, and in your console log you can simply print the error like this. You won't be able to see the output of this also because we are not having any UI yet. Okay, but this is a very useful life cycle hook. Like whenever you have to catch error in a long queue or in a long chain of components, you can use this error callback as well, right? So let's move to the next slide, which will take us to the next topic, which is composition. So the lightning web component composition is very easy to understand. Like in this diagram, you can see we are having a root component, then underneath it we are having parent. In root component we are having a child as well, then we are having another child component, subchilds component here. In LWC you can create or compose a component with a set of smaller components to make code more reusable and easy to maintain. Okay, let's look at some example of it and learn like how you can compose a child component in the parent component. Okay, so for that, For that, I have already created few components here. Like here, I'm having 3 components. The first one is grandparent, which is having static text which says I am grandparent component. The second one is parent, which is also having a static text which says I am parent component. Then we have another component which is child, I believe. Yes, here it is, which says I am a child component, and we are having another child where I name the component as another child, okay, which is having text like I am second child component. So here we'll be creating a hierarchy where first we'll be having parent component, then we'll be having child component under it, okay. And by parent I mean grandparent component, then we'll be having parent component, and underneath that parent component we'll be having 2 child components. So basically it will be creating a tree, and the tree will look like this. Let me move to the next slide, this one. So this is the tree we are going to create right now: grandparent, parent, and then 2 childs, okay. So right now these are independent components, they are not connected with each other, okay. So now we will try to connect these components one by one. So first let's start with the grandparent one. So we'll be connecting the parent component with this grandparent one, okay. So to compose a component, what you can do is you just have to use the syntax. Like to add a component you have to add it like C, then hyphen, then you have to add the component name. Like in my case it is child, okay. And you have to make sure, like if you're using any capital letters in your component's name, then you have to add a hyphen, and you have to add that name, add that letter in small cases. You cannot, let's suppose like if this component name is child component instead of child, okay, usually we can do it like, right. So let's suppose this is the component name, but if you want to add it as a composition in a parent component, so you have to use it in small letters, and before the capital letter you have to add a hyphen sign. So this is going to be the syntax of it. In this case right now it is just child, so we will just use child, okay. Oh, sorry, I was supposed to add parent here. Yep, here it is. So here we have added parent in grandparent component, okay. Let me save it. It is saved. All right, now let me move to the parent component. Where it is, here. So in parent component also we will just add a new line first, then we will add first we will add child component, so C child, and then we will add another child. So if you'll notice, for another child, the actual name of the component is just a second. The actual name of the component here, if you will see, I have used camel keys. The C in child is in capital here, but here while composing it as a child, I will do another, then before C I will use hyphen, then I will write small c here, child, like this. So this is the way, this is the syntax you can use to add component, add a composition for these component, okay. Now let me quickly push it. Okay, it is almost, yeah, it is deployed now. So now if you will see the output here, so this is the first component, grandparent, which is just having a static text which says I'm grandparent component, okay. Now if I will refresh it, and if we don't have any error, then we will be able to see all 3 components. Yes, so here you can see I'm grandparent component, underneath it I'm parent component, underneath it we are having child component and the second child component as well. And also guys, on the right side you may notice some console log which are related to the life cycle hooks. Let me show it to you. So let's start with the child component first. Okay, let me move to child component. So in child component, if you'll notice, we are having constructor, connected callback, render callback, right? And here, if you notice, so first constructor of grandparent is called, then connected callback of grandparent is called, then constructor of parent, connected callback of parent. Then you can see constructor of child, connected callback of child, then render callback of the child component, then constructor of the second child, connected callback of the second child, and then render callback of the second child, because render callback will always flow from child to parent, right? So that's why you are not able to see the render callback of grandparent and parent now, because they are having child components in it. Now once a render callback of child components will be called, after that it will execute render callback of parent component first, right? And then it will execute render callback of the grandparent component as well. So that's how the component hierarchy will work. That's how the component lifecycle hooks are going to execute one after each other, right? So yep, that's it for today, guys. Uh, I hope you understand now like how lifecycle hooks works and how you can compose your components one after each other. There are few more things to remember here while you are composing these components. So there are three major points, like the owner, the container, and parent and child relation, right? So the owner is the component that owns the template. In the previous example, the owner was parent, right? So the owner will control all the composed component that it contains. The owner can set public property on child components, call methods on composed components, and listen for any event fired by the composed components. So in this hierarchy, the grandparent is the owner for this parent, and this parent is the owner of for these two child. This parent can listen to the events fired by these two childs, and the same way the grandparent will be able to listen to events fired by this parent. This parent can set properties on child 1 and child 2, and this grandparent can set properties on parent only. Okay, and also guys, these components will be having access to its child component and parent only, the first child and first parent only. Let's suppose if you have to pass something from grandparent to child component, you cannot do it directly. You have to first pass the thing on the parent component, then the parent will be passing the same stuff to the child one. The same way, if you have to bubble up an event from child component to grandparent one, so that is also not possible directly. First, you have to bubble up that event from child to parent, then that same event can be bubbled up from parent to grandparent, because this hierarchy can only take a single step to its first parent and first child. Now let's talk about container. A container contains other components but itself is contained within the owner component. In previous example, parent is a container. A container is less powerful than the owner. A container can read but not change public properties in contained component, call methods on composed component, and listen for some but not necessary all events bubbled up by component that it's contained. Okay. Now, when a component contains another component, which is in turn can contain other components, we have a containment hierarchy. In the documentation, we sometimes talk about parent and child component. A parent component contains a child component. A parent component can be the owner of a container as well. Okay, but the hierarchy still is going to be work only for its first child and first parent, right? So I think that was the last slide. Yes, it is. So that's it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video. And if you like the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you have any comments on this video, you can leave. If you have any query in this video, you can leave the comment below. I'll try to revert back as soon as possible. I'll see you in the next one, guys. Thanks for watching.